Hello, my friends. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again. This week, I'm going to be interviewing Adam, all about mental health and also some tips and tricks on those who are a partner or a friend or someone who's going through potentially some mental health concerns about what potentially to do, or maybe some grievances. That was the conversation we wanted to have today. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me. If you took value from this episode, why not subscribe so you don't miss next week, where we're going to be trying to help you continue to make yourself be excellent, make yourself be the best person you possibly can. And I'll now hand over to past me to conduct this interview. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again, and I'll see you in just a moment's time.
My name's Adam Abel. I host my own podcast, Abel Lifestyle. I'm currently training for a marathon, followed by ultra marathons. Got a very heavy background in football, coaching, playing. Done a lot of public speaking as well. So I'm now just on a mission and on a purpose to get the conversations flowing and get people talking and make this world a better place.
Thanks, Adam, and I really appreciate the time, because I think, a lot of the questions I'm asked is, who do I bring on the show, why do I bring them on, etc. And I think from what really stood out to you, I mean, obviously we met through Phoenix Showcase and other things as well, but I think for me the important element was, I want to say, your passion, and I don't want to speak for you, but it's one of those things where sometimes people, especially people who deal with mental health, and for the audience's own clarity, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be mental health, and it's going to be about potentially borderline abusive behavior and emotional abuse, etc. So if that's not something that you're overly is going to be healthy for your mental health right now, then maybe this episode may be a good skip for you. But if that is something that you do want to educate yourself on, then of course continue to listen. But I think there's a lot of people who say, I mean, as men, right, we're two men sat here talking about mental health, right? There's a lot of kind of stereotype around that, and I think that's where we should start, which is like, well, you're a man, so you should be stoic, right? And I think that what should you be is, I guess, the starting question.
Well, I think the issue is we go two sides of the extremes far too much. So it's either that, be really stoic, nut up, shut up, don't talk about it. You've got to be a strong bloke, or it's that, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to hurt and like show your emotions. And it's like, hang on a minute. If you take a bit from both sides and meet in the middle, that's where it needs to be. It's like, you need to be vulnerable. You need to show your emotions and show them. However, you still have to turn up when you need to. And you still have to be that strong character, that warrior. So it's really striking that fine balance. And I don't think that extremes are healthy, but yeah, right in the middle is where we need to sort of aim for in this new
I
culture and
think I think that's
society.
a really important point, because I think sometimes people who consume my content may see me as someone who hit myself with the stoic stick repeatedly, regardless of how I feel. Right now, that is technically true in some cases, but the bit that one sometimes doesn't necessarily appreciate is the context which you're applying that to, right? So who are you talking to? What is it about? Is it about something you need to heal from, right? And I think, and if you would be so kind to share the story, I know you've done it on your show, but for my audience's context, why did you start a show? Why did you start a podcast? Because obviously I know the reason, but for my audience's context, what was the reasoning behind it? Why did you go there? Because a lot of people would be like, well, I don't really want to be public necessarily, right?
Everyone's got a story, they just don't realize it. And I'm very much in a place now where I want to make the world a better place through these conversations and through enabling people to talk about their experiences and everything they've been through. My story, I'd say, heavily started last year on the 8th of June when I received a call that would change my life forever. My mum went for a walk and she called me, said, something's happening, I'm in trouble. And then the phone cuts dead. And straight away, it's what's your fight or flight response? So it's get out the door. And roughly, I knew when mum walked. So me and my dad went out. I can't remember, we locked the door at this point. I found my mum and she was hobbling. She had, I couldn't feel the right side of my body, and felt like I had a clamp around her head. And instantly, because she's had high blood pressure and Bell palsy before, which is stroke-like symptoms, but more short-term rather than the long-term issues. So I was like, she's having a stroke or some sort of neurological issue. Over the next hour and a half, she deteriorated to a point where I had to do CPR and I had to keep her alive. And then went to hospital in an ambulance. She had an queue of 8 ambulances. She then had a witness seizure, which basically sort of finished her off. And turns out she had a brain aneurysm. So over the next 3.5 days, we're in ICU at Salisbury Hospital. And this happened 2 days before my 23rd birthday. So yeah, over the next 3.5 days in ICU, she passed away day after my 23rd birthday. So that's sort of where this sort of story really began. And it was a long journey over the next sort of year trying to heal from that and also deal with a lot of other issues that cropped up along the journey. But because I've been through all that, I now want to help and educate and support others through what was originally my worst day. I now want to be there for them because I know exactly what I would have wanted or needed through that
I
time.
mean, firstly, thank you for sharing that, and I know you've shared it publicly before. That's why I didn't really have an issue with asking you. But I think there's a lot of value potentially there. There's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of mental clarity that people could potentially gain from that. And I think that, you know, a loss and a healing in general from anything is a very personal thing. And I think I think one needs to be very careful with how they answer the next following question. But I think, how did you approach that healing process? And the reason why I ask it is because I think potentially as we look moving forward, the reality is everyone's going to have to deal with that reality at some point if it hasn't happened yet, myself included. And I think that you can't ever be fully prepared. I mean, I guess there's kind of a two-part question there is, number one, did you sort of know, like in some ways you were like, before that it was like, mum's deteriorating, look, is there gonna, is this day going to come? And if so, how did you prepare yourself as much as you can prepare yourself for that? And then number two, how was your healing process, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in there's no right or wrong way to deal with grief, deal with loss. I do, however, think there's a better way. And a lot of people may disagree with that statement. However, from past experience, I believe that you can do as much as you possibly can to help your healing journey as much as possible. For me, I'd say I luckily went through something traumatic a few years before that. So I knew the sort of direction I needed to take and what I needed to stay away from to stop triggers from happening. So straight away, I called up my surgery and said, "There's a lovely woman, amazing woman called Penny. My face lights up every time I talk about her because she's such a lifesaver." Um, I went and got counselling straight away. I called them up, said, "I need Penny. Is she still there? Please tell me she's there. I beg." And yeah, they said, "Yeah, she's still here." I was like, "Please get me her now because I need to." There's so much has happened, and yeah, and I went and spoke about it, and I'm still in counselling now, 17 months later, more for general sort of health purposes rather than for getting over that trauma at the time. But yeah, I thankfully went and got counselling, amazing counselling, and it's really helped my healing journey and discovery journey, and now more into this purpose. Um, so it's been really, really valuable, and it's also taught me as well what things I need to sort of steer away from to keep myself on that right track. And to answer the second question, this was out of the blue, complete shock. There was no warning signs, no nothing. So my mum had a brain aneurysm, which I can't really remember the actual description. I probably should look this up. They might talk about it. But it's basically the brain basically gets crushed and it stops in the pathways to the heart to beat. So mum went in and out of consciousness when I was doing CPR, which would explain the aneurysm with the pathways stop and go into the heart. So every time I've done the beats, she'd come back alive. That I thought anyway. It's hard to tell looking back now. And then she go back under when I stopped because that's where the pathway stopped. So yeah, there's no warning signs. It's really, really out the blue. Um, I've been through sort of long deterioration with grandparents and stuff prior, and you can prepare for that in some certain situation. But when it does happen, there's nothing you can do to prepare for that. However, you do have that sort of initial spike get taken out of it. And the thing with mum is it literally happened over a period of 90 minutes that we were in the sort of field where we were. And then it was like 4 hours before we got told the sort of outcome. Um, but the second it happened, straight away I went to the back of my head and went, yeah, I remember I come home after she went into the ambulance. And I was like, yeah, mum's gone forever. That's it. That's the last time you're going to see your mum. And that was very much a sort of coping mechanism and sort of self-preservation, should I say.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm very cautious whenever I talk about healing, because it's very personal, right? It's very, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the things I've been through in social so well in the show, but I think a lot of it can be, I guess, in some ways glamorized by others, right? In the respect to, oh, you're healing, right? So I need to be cautious around you, right? And I think, what would you say to people? Because there's going to be a percentage of people who, like, either unfortunately have to go through this in the near future, or are going to have someone close to them, right? And I think that's the bit we one should focus on, because sometimes I think we, as friends, family members, people close to the person going through it, we're in this helpless place of like, I want to help, but I don't know how to, right? Because, and I agree with the counselling and I agree with talking to people, etc. But at the initial stages, whenever you go through anything traumatic, potentially, I don't want to. I want to be left alone to figure it out, right? This is what I know works for me, right? Which is like, look,
Yeah,
I've got to figure this shit out myself, right? Now, it depends, of course, on the context and
yeah.
etc. And I'm sure we'll get into that later. But what would you, if you were going to give advice, maybe you should or shouldn't, but if you were going to,
Yeah.
what would you say to people who are close to that person, whether it's yourself or a family member? Because I think that's actually sometimes the more important question to ask, because the person themselves is only going to do what they feel is necessary, right? But the people around them won't necessarily
Yeah.
know how to react or should react.
It's as simple as presence. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to do anything. You just have to simply be there, because you don't actually understand the significance and importance of someone close to you that cares for you being with you in your worst day. My best friend Liana Atkinson, the second I told her, she was straight around my house, and then she went home because, I mean, we didn't know the outcome at this point, but the second I knew the outcome, straight away she come to the hospital, spent 3.5 days with me, didn't leave my side one single second, didn't even tell work she wasn't going in, and just to have that there was everything to me. And I had other mates, Billy Page, Shay Robinson, they just dropped everything to be there, and that presence was everything. And my girlfriend at the time said to my best mate, I don't know what to say to him. And she said, you don't need to, you just need to be there. And yeah, like I say, that presence is so important, because there's nothing you can say to change anything. There's nothing you can do. You're at a loose end. There's nothing you can change. You can't change this. So all you can do is be there for that person, to protect them and be there for them when they're ready to slip. Because us being the stoic characters that we sort of are, we will break one day, and we'll try and stay as strong as possible. But when we slip, we need those people around us to get us back to that stoic
I think
point.
that's a really important point to mention, though, because I think when we look at stoic characters, we see them as bulletproof, right? Deliberately, by proxy. And I think that sometimes maybe people don't see the behind the scenes for obvious reasons. But I think, and I've had it, I'm sure you've had it, etc., where I've been overly stoic. I've continued to go, regardless of how it feels, because that's what I should do, right? I'm a man. I should create income. I should do this. I should continue to be flourishing business, etc. Everything's fine, regardless of the economy, regardless of how I feel, regardless of my mental health, etc. But there is also a point where you will break, right? And it's whether, I guess in some ways you have that support system to lean on, and whether that's a brotherhood, whether that's a partner, whether that's a family member, etc., or a combination of the above. I think the crux in some ways for everyone is getting in touch with you, right, yourself. And I think that's the important point. And I know we alluded to your ex-partner at the time, but was girlfriend at the time. And the reason why I want to touch on there is because I think that's potentially going to be more common, because the kind of natural order of the world is our parents are meant to die before us, right? That's the natural order.
It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed 9 times out of 10, and you kind of expect that to happen. And I mean, if they live 70, 80, 90 years, I'm almost content with that. I'm almost okay with that. Obviously, it's sad when you lose a parent, but what really hit hard, and the guilt that hit me, was my mum was only 48. And not only that, like, she was I know everyone when they pass, like, the nicest, kindest, caring person and all this jazz, but like, my mum was an angel, and like, she just made this world such a better place, and such a positive character. And all my mates would come around my house to see her and not me, because of that's the person she was. And that's a guilt that really kicked in and hit hard for me. It was so unexpected and so shocked. Like, if that happened at age 70, 80, I'm not saying there's a specific age, and I'm grateful to get 23 years with me mum. Let's be real. But when they're older, you kind of go, okay, this is a sort of circle of life. This is part and parcel, unfortunately. life is cruel and that's that. But yeah, there's a shockability in that suddenness that
I mean,
really
I
hit
think
hard.
to an extent, I mean, I thought about this for a long time, when I started building the company, and I was like, okay, well, what does that mean, right? Like, and for the audience's context, my mother's first name, as in the first married name she had, was Brunton. It's not my father's name, right? Now, there's a separate story there that I've talked about at length as well, but the crux there is, she isn't going to be around forever, but potentially, as long as I will it to be, the business can be, right? And this, what we're talking about here, is legacy, right? And the next question I had for you about that was, how do you feel the podcast? Do you feel what you're doing? Do you feel it's such a, like, because a lot of people talk about legacy, right? Now, really simple terms, you die twice, right? You die once physically, and then you die again when your name is not being said, right? William Shakespeare is an example. His legacy is still living on, even though he's been dead for a very, very long time, right? The same can be true in the work we do. And I think for me, especially as I'm getting older and I'm, potentially having more hurdles or more issues or more concerns, because the reality of my life is becoming more stressful because of more obligations, etc. I'm thinking more about what is the legacy that I do and I wake up for, rather than what's my bank balance, rather than what, because I think sometimes we can be alienated by this, hustle culture, or this concept of, oh, I need to make lots of money because I need to be perceived to be successful, right? And you get more shiny things, you get a bigger office, you get a nicer car, you get a nice house, etc. Okay, does that really matter? Don't know. That's subjective. That's up to the person. I think in the long term it doesn't, because those things won't be the things that are remembered. I believe personally that your legacy, and what that means, and it leads on to the next question I was going to ask you, what is either yours or your mum's legacy, would you say then? Because if you believe like I do, and I believe you do, that legacy is actually more important than anything else, that is the crux, or that is the kind of sword in the stone, so to speak, that allows us to continue to move forward regardless of how we feel.
Yeah, it's coming up to Christmas time now, which is a sort of tough time of year because of what my mum used to do for me at Christmas, and she used to go way over the top. Not to say like presents wise as such, but more presents and more the activities and how bubbly and how amazing she was. And this is why this Christmas I've started to really see as many as close friends as possible and do as much with friends as possible. Um, because when I was in hospital, so it was my birthday, and prior, my mum said, "I'm going to get you a necklace, a really nice necklace, like a proper expensive one." I was like, "No, that'll be my only gift. Like, please don't," because I used to wear really tacky jewelry and she hated it. And yeah, she's on a deathbed in ICU, and dad gave me my birthday presents and open up this bag, open up the box, and it's this really nice necklace that she said that she was going to get me. And I was just like, it broke me in half, and I still wear it to this day. And there's no amount of gifts, same at Christmas, there's no amount of gifts that I would have to swap for my mum, because she means so much more to be here with me than any gift could ever have. All these material items, everyone chases the brand new car, the 50 grand car, the big 5-bed house, the let's take home as much money every year as we can, let's work 70-hour weeks, let's work 7 days a week. And it's just like, okay, great, but what would you rather? All this money and no memories, or like less money and more memories? And to allude onto the legacy, like I said, my mates used to come around to see my mum, to talk to her about things, and everyone loved my mum because she was such a bubbly and fun character, and she made the world a better place. And my purpose now is to help others and make this world a better place. Every day when I wake up, it's how can I make a positive impact that will try and leave a legacy. And everything from the podcast, the conversations that are being stemmed. I've had people start therapy from my podcast episode. I mean, that is like, the podcast could die on its face now, right now. I've already made an impact. It's now just, can we continue this momentum going? That is what success is for me. Numbers are irrelevant, money's irrelevant. It's just, how can I make this world a better place and make those around me happier? And yeah, like I said, make this world a better place.
A really important point to reflect on sometimes, because I think we were in this, especially at the moment in the economy, right? Everyone's looking at their bottom line, everyone's looking at how do I make an extra dime, etc., etc., etc. But I think the ones who are going to make it through, quote unquote, are the ones who are really able to connect with their reasoning, right? A lot of the work I'm doing off camera at the moment is like that internal reflection upon why am I making the decisions I'm making? Because ironically, this morning I was looking at like videography jobs, right? And the salary is greater than what I'm making at the moment. Okay, fine, but what impact am I making? Can I make the same impact potentially through those jobs, right? And just like, I'm not planning to go get a job, right? But in a world where I was, could I make more legacy impact, or could I make something more meaningful in the world in my regard? No, absolutely fucking not, right? And that's something that I value greater than a financial salary, quote unquote, right? Money in the bank.
Yeah. It's always, it comes down to this: I'll be happy when sort of motto. I'll be happy when I've got the car. I'll be happy when I've got the job. I'll be happy when I've got the house. I'll be happy when I've got the marriage. And it's just like everyone, they get this car and it's like, oh, that's great. And then that happiness drops again. And they're like, okay, I'll be happy when I've got this house. And they get the house. And again, it's that chasing happiness, and it's always chasing materialistic things. And really, it should be actually stop a second, look around you right now. Who do you have? What do you have? What are you doing right now? What experiences have you had in your life? And that's what people tend to forget, is they tend to forget where they come from because they're so hell bent on chasing the future and what they want in the future. And it's just like, yes, have goals in sight, be driven, but don't forget where you come from, but don't forget also to live in present day.
I think it's and that's why I mentioned legacy a lot, right? Because I think it's a really important regrounding to ask yourself, why are you working so hard, right? Because in really layman's terms, right, when we don't gain the results we're thinking we're going to gain or should gain, etc., 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 we can potentially be disheartened, and we potentially could say, well, fuck this, I'm going to go get a job, right? But I think that's kind of not thinking greater than we potentially could or should, right? Because as you've already alluded to, what meaningful, like the question is, what are you driven by, right? Are you driven by meaningful change in the world, or are you driven by a bank account balance? Okay, I know personally I'm driven by meaningful change in the world, right? And I know, speaking personally for Salisbury's context, I've made meaningful change to the city from the work I've done. I know that categorically because of what people have said to me, and I know that I have an influence in Salisbury, potentially greater areas as well. Yeah. We'll see, right? But specifically in Salisbury, I know that's the case because of the work I'm doing, etc. Now, as I've talked about many times, 95% of that work is for free and or cost me money, right? If I was driven by profit, quote unquote, I wouldn't be doing them, right? I wouldn't.
Yeah. No.
The crux, though, is what is the legacy that I would gain potentially, or what does Brunton mean for me? And that means more to me than any amount of money, right? That's an important thing to gather. And I think people, if they're going to take anything away from this conversation, I think they should consider what is their legacy. Because... And I hate using the corny terms like, oh, you can't take your bank balance to the grave, etc. You can't, but that's a very entitled view because we need money to live, right? Sure, fine.
Yeah, it's again though, let's go down to the stoic and the sort of vulnerability. It's meeting that fine middle. It's having the best of both worlds to whatever balance we can get.
And something that, as I said, I've been reflecting on recently is like, is my reality today better than it was a year ago? Absolutely, by a mile, right? Is there still concerns? Is there still things I need to fix and still fix as a man? Sure, fine. But that's the opportunity I'm given every day, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to be able to do so. It's an obligation, it's an honor, sure. But that's my place and that's my role that I feel I should hold, right? And especially in a romantic relationship or even a family dynamic. And I know we're going to get on to potentially romantic relationships as a whole, but I think for me this year specifically, as we're filming this, towards the end of the year, but this will be released in 2024. For me this year specifically has been a reflection upon why have I made the decisions I've made, especially from a romantic point of view. Yeah. And it's saying, what does that say about me? I could sit here and say, well, she did this or he did this or whatever. But I think, to those who maybe have picked the wrong people, right? Because at the end of the day, it takes two to tango, right? Why? Why? Right? I personally have been asking that a lot recently, and this year specifically, it's saying why, but why? What's your story around that? Why did you potentially choose? What happened with that, etc.? Because I think it's important to reflect on why we chose, because at the end of the day, we still chose the person, right? What did that say about us?
It's having that accountability though, to say, that it was my decision. I'm going to hold my hands up. It didn't work, and that's that. But the key thing here that I find a lot of people don't do is they don't try and make change. It's because they're scared to. So there's a lot of people out there that are in unhappy relationships, constant arguments, and they just settle for that. They don't try and have these conversations. And then if these conversations keep happening, they don't try and make that step to try and change to sort of leave a relationship because it's easy to stay. And it's actually having that accountability for yourself and that self standard and that's the high self value of yourself to go, hang on a minute, I deserve better than this without taking that too egotistical. But yeah, to touch on my story, so after my mum passed, my dad bumped into his now girlfriend, who, by the way, is amazing, lovely woman. Quite soon after mum passed, can't tell the sort of timescales, was a rough time at the time. Um, but she popped round unexpected. He'd go out till like 11 at night, so it sort of brought a bit of a frail relationship between the both of us. Um, Admittedly, we're at the best place we've ever been now. We're really strong, me and my dad together. But my girlfriend at the time wanted to move out prior to mum passing. And then I thought, okay, I'm at this point where I'm not happy at home because me and my dad are arguing. Girlfriend wants to move out. It's time to go live my life and make my story. So we moved out in January. And then over the next 4 months, I took the decision to split with her because the relationship took a sour turn, should I say. Um, she became very abusive physically. Nothing to a point that would leave marks or would scar. However, it's a point of if you really love someone, why would you lay a finger on them negatively? And you could also say as well emotional manipulation and using that because that comes with like that's sort of the prior to the physicalness coming out. So yeah, I took the decision in April to I got to a point. I even spoke to my counselor prior to this happening. So if I get to this in relationship a month, 10 years, 15 years with kids, marriage. If I get to a point where my own self worth is diminishing, no matter what attachments or sort of responsibilities I have, I will walk away because I'm not willing to let my own self standards slip because it's easy to stay.
I mean, there's a lot there, but I mean, I'm going to ask the elephant in the room question, right? Like, you're clearly a well-built guy, right? Same way I am, right? How does a guy get physically abused, right? You're physically stronger, surely. How does that happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. She was a lot smaller than me physically, um, but end of the day, it happens. It's a very it's probably more common than people realize. Just blokes don't talk out about it because usually, and granted, it usually happens the opposite way around with a male hurts a female, and usually it is quite tragic. It usually ends really badly. Granted, however, it also does happen the other way around where the female does hurt the male, and also the males don't like to talk about it because a who's going to believe them really, especially when you get a size difference, and b it also comes down to that stoic. You don't want to hurt your own ego. You don't want to, I'm
I
a
think there also comes from the principle of like you shouldn't hit a woman thing, right? Now, I'm not saying you should. I'm pointing out that there is a legitimate size and strength and biological advantage to be a man, right? So it does pose the question: how does a man get physically abused? Okay, I guess the answer there is because of that reality. You don't want to use that force because what could potentially happen socially. Do you think it would? I guess let me ask you:
yeah.
was it that? Do you think?
It was more, well, I mean, it was one of those things that just sort of it happened out of the blue. It was nothing that you could almost like prepare yourself for. It happened sort of off the cusp, and not only that, it's how to put this sort of bluntly, politely. It's also that I was never gonna touch her or harm her in any bad way at all. But it's also a thing of who's gonna believe me,
Yeah, the
however
social
this works out.
consequences of
'Cause
you potentially if she wrongly or rightly goes to the authorities, goes to someone and says, "Oh, so and so hit me."
even if I've done nothing, what's a more believable story here as such? And it's also one of those things I couldn't go tell my mates about because it's one of those things. If I tell them about it, they are never going to look at her in the same possible way. So almost in this situation, I had to really deal with this on my own. And it only got to a point where it got quite bad, where I then text my dad, go, Dad, this is happening. I'm just texting you this to sort of fail safe me. To, if anything does happen, there's sort of a little bit of proof in the text message. Go, I've given you a warning. But yeah, every time it happened, I stood back and I put my hands up and I was like, look, I'm not going to do anything. Do what you want. I'm not going to react. And that is that. And that's the honest truth. But like I said, it wasn't anything that scarred or bruised. However, it's still the fact that it
I think
happened.
that's an important point. I think it, as I said, and that's why I focus on the why did we choose who we chose question, because I think it's a more important one than sitting here pointing blame. Because the reality is we have the scars of our previous decisions, regardless of whether we're fully healed or not. The scars are there either mentally or physically or in general emotionally, right? And I think, especially as someone who's been not physically there but emotionally there, it's something which you change, especially at a time for me when I was still developing emotionally and understanding, what the fuck does love mean, what the fuck does all this stuff mean, etc. What is a normal relationship? I think it's important to reflect on it and ask yourself, as I say, what, like I did at the start of the year, into the first 6 months of the year, and said, well, why did I make those decisions? Because I think it's easier to say, oh, they did this, they did that, they were abusive, they were fucked up. Look, the reality is 95% of cases because they have unhealed trauma from their past. Okay? Cool. Right. Okay, but did you see the potential red flags? Or did you see the potential yardstick when it came to those potential unhealed red flags? Okay. Then did you still make the choice to move forward? Okay, whose fault is that? It's not saying you specifically, but when they're in that situation, right? Did they see the signs, or were they blinded to the signs? Perhaps.
Um, this sort of also came at a time where when I moved out, I said to myself, I'm going to stop most things. I'm going to just sit at home and sort of try and deal with my trauma of everything that happened with my mum, everything that's gone on. So it also came at a time where I was almost in survival mode, where you are almost not, I say not consciously making decisions as such, but you're actively trying to make these decisions. Sub Yeah, yeah, you're very much in that fight or flight half the time. So I was almost trying to deal with that at the time, and then this come on top. But there was no real sort of warning signs beforehand. Anytime she sort of like flipped out, like emotionally, like in arguments or anything, you put it down to a bad day or the anxiety's high. So there was nothing really to, and it never got to that level prior to sort of us moving out. It was only you're in each other's space 24/7, do you then really start to realize what you're in? So there was no real warning signs prior to this. But again, I've learned a lot from the relationship. She was there for me through my worst times, so I can only thank her for that, and I won't discredit her for that. But yeah, I've learned a lot about myself and learned a lot about what I think I need and want from a relationship. So I don't really see it as a regret or a mistake. I see it as more of a lesson and an experience that I've
I
been
know
through.
100% agree, and I think that we are, as I say, we are the people we are today because of what we've done, what's happened previously, myself included, right? And there's no point me going out of my way to say this person's wronged me, f you, blah blah blah, right? And maybe if that has been alluded to in the past, it's potentially because I was needing to heal and I was in pain, right? And I was trying to lash out potentially because I wanted, and the reason why we do that really from a psychological point of view is we don't want the hurt anymore. We want to survive. We won't want this pain, and one of the ways to do it is through lashing out because it's an aggression rather than the best defense is a great offense, right? But the crux there, I think, sometimes, and what a lot of people do in my personal experience, talking to people for mental health open spaces, etc., but also in my own experience as well, is we find it a lot harder to say why did we make that decision and why did I do that, right? Because it's harder for us to own up to a mistake than it is to blame the other person, right? It's to say very, very easily going, oh, it's their fault.
Yeah, the thing is, you've got to be accountable for your own actions, and when real change comes is when the sort of the pain of what you're going through overtakes the fear of the change. That's when people really do change. And like I said, that boiling point for me was my own self-worth was diminishing, my relationships with other people were diminishing. So that's when I knew I was like, I mean, I gave it every sort of stoic man's chance to be the gentleman, work through it, get them help, put that quite lightly. I tried everything I could, but kept getting to a point I was like, nothing is changing. I'm doing all these things and nothing's changing. As I got to a point, I need to make this change for my own well-being, because a lot of people in relationships put others first ahead of themselves. Whereas you need to There's that analogy of when a plane's going down, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you put someone else's on, because you won't be able to make that conscious decision for yourself to do that without your own oxygen mask. So it's that help yourself first
Yeah,
before
I
you
mean,
can
there's
help
loads of
someone
analogy
else.
I could use. One of which being you can't feed the homeless from an empty fridge, right?
You know, you can
But
take a horse to
you
water,
can't
but you
make a
can't
drink,
make a drink.
etc.
Yeah,
So I think it's a really important point, and I think sometimes we, because of our pride, what does this mean, right? Like, I'll give you an example. A very close friend of mine, I obviously won't speak his name for obvious reasons, but at the start of the year had this exact social, what I would call social contraction, right? He went from being high status, all of these things going well, etc., etc., the partner, the job, the etc., but then he was grossly unhappy and he went for other things he needs to heal from. Okay, great.
yeah,
Okay, and then he had to retreat. He had to move backwards socially. And I think, as we see from an economic point of view, as we see the contraction getting potentially worse, potentially not, who knows? But if it does get worse, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to stay on that stoic thing and going to continue to move on a trajectory that may be worse for their own mental, physical being themselves, because their pride won't let them fall back socially, or what the perception to them would be falling back socially. And I think the same is true when we have a partner, right? We don't look at what is the status relationship between our partner and us, right? What's the status relationship there?
'cause they very much become you as such. Like, you are known with you and your partner. You become this sort of couple, that's your identity. And a lot of people, their ego, they won't let their ego get hurt. They won't let ego get touched. And it's like, put your ego to one side and
Yeah.
put yourself first.
And I think as well, there's a lot of healing and a lot of question marks around that as well, because I've said this to my current partner, and I'll say this moving forward. I have gone out of my way to say we are two independent individuals who make a conscious choice daily to spend time together, right? And to be in each other's lives. For as long as that's mutually beneficial, this will continue to exist. In a world where that isn't mutually beneficial, it will most likely not exist. Not saying that that's going to happen, right? It might be fine for the rest of time. It also might end tomorrow, right? And I think that I've been grateful and been in a very grateful place because of the previous relationships I've been in that's got me to this point, right? To know how to have good, I guess in some ways, good mental health, to understand that in the nicest way possible, like, my partner isn't solely me. I am an individual, she is an individual, and we're both, completely loved and completely amazing individuals on our own right. And then we choose to spend time together and be together because that's beneficial for both of us, right? And I think that's the important point.
Your partner should bring the best out of you. They should help sort of bring your character even higher.
They should be an addition or a compliment. They shouldn't necessarily, and the same goes the other way around, by the way. It shouldn't be this kind of, I have to be with this person for my self-worth to be valuable. I am valuable within myself, and I give myself all the things I need to emotionally, me, not through them necessarily. Anything I gain from them is a bonus, great, fantastic, but I think it comes with a level of emotional maturity, and also, to be honest, I think a level of shit relationships.
Yeah, perspective is everything in life. It comes with every experience. And I was having this conversation with a close friend of mine. He was having a bit of a rocky time with his partner, and I spoke to him. I was like, "How's things?" Like, "Yeah, they're all good now. I just couldn't see myself without her, and she makes me happy." And I'm like, "No, you need to change this perception. She should make you happier. She shouldn't be the reason you're happy. She should add value to your life, but it shouldn't be the only reason of whether you're happy or sad today." And I think a lot of people need to start understanding and
I think as
recognizing.
well, and I'm sure I won't be the first one to say this, but it's easier to stay in a relationship than it is to leave one, right? Because there's a lot of life change that happens, etc., etc. But I think there should be a level of independence, whether that's, let's say, for example, you both work at home, right? Okay, have separate offices within your house if possible. Have different areas in your house where you work, right? So you're not necessarily on top of each other every day. If possible, one of you go out to your job, the other one work from home, or both of you go out to your job, etc. Things like this, because I think otherwise you can be around each other too much, and then you don't. Number one, I think sometimes you would not take advantage, but like you assume, oh yeah, that person's going to be there, right? So when they're not, you'll feel like there's something missing. But if you've constantly had that kind
Yeah.
of independence itself, and this goes both ways, by the way, right? And I think it's really important to mention
Yeah.
because you need contrast in your life as a whole, contrast in people, contrast in environment, contrast, etc. Even if that's I'm going to go on a walk now, right, rather than being in my house. And I think sometimes we can, if that barrier or if that reality, like especially socially or like your own self-worth is tied to it, you're more likely to turn a blind eye to the consistent argument, or turn a blind eye to the, well, you're clearly pissed off about something but you don't want to talk about it, or
It's,
etc.
absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. It's having that spare time and that self-identity to, for me, I go to the gym, I run, I take care of my health, because I know if I go do that, I'll be the best possible person for whoever my partner is at the time. But without that, I'm gonna potentially take things out on them, because I'm not looking after myself and not taking care of my own sort of physical and mental well-being. So I'm not giving my all to my
I mean,
partner.
here's a question that I think a percentage of either businesses, or especially the second business, was going to ask is like, can you be vulnerable with your partner, right? As in, because I think as a stoic characters, we're meant to be this. Especially if you look on the red pill side of the internet, etc. You know, they're always going to say, no, you must be the man, you must be the hero, you must be, you know, the solution, you must be, etc. You can't possibly be vulnerable or talk about your problems with your partner, right? How dare you? I mean, what's your view on that? Is that possible? Do you think? Should you?
I think, yeah, I think vulnerability to a partner is a great thing. Absolutely, wholeheartedly. I think it makes you a better person and makes you a stronger man. So when you need to be that stoic, strong character out in the world, you're able to, because you've dealt with your emotions and your vulnerability. It's not one of those things of, I'm stressed, I'm going through all this, I'm going to throw it at you. It's that thing of showing your actual true self, and they're going to help you put your sort of your armor back on. So when you go out and need to be that stoic man, you're in the best place possible. I watched Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Bumstead, and I mean he's the epitome of the stoic man, 5 times Mr. Olympia, and he opens up about how he was crying in the bathroom not long before his Olympia to his fiance, saying, the pressure of the world's on me, and all she done was comfort him, and I mean, he went and won his fifth Mr. Olympia. So, I mean, if that can come from the most stoic man there is, I mean, who's to say that we can't be
I think it,
vulnerable?
and this is what I always say when people ask me about it. I think it's the context. I think the context is really important. What's the context of the previous relationship, right? Have you known this person a long time, whatever that means for you, or do you have another outlet, right? If you're not doing it with your then girlfriend because maybe it's too soon for the relationship, or you're not ready to be that vulnerable with that person, etc., 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 do you have someone else you can be? And I think it's very important, and I think the crux here is you should have a person you can be truly vulnerable with. Ideally, everyone close to you, but at least one. And I think, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure it's correct in saying if those listening need a place to have a unbiased view, both of our inboxes are open to do that, and I think it's important for people to reflect. And I think actually, like most things in life, it's a grey area. It's not a kind of, I do this and then this is the solution. I think in some relationships, yes, you absolutely can be, depending again on who are you with. If potentially it's because I think the crux there is you need to understand, and the person that you're being vulnerable with needs to understand that this is a point in your life, and it doesn't necessarily mean you can't be that stoic figure. It's that actually underneath that and behind that armor, that shield, is a real person who feels real things, right? And I think it's not. Yeah. I think especially as men, we're conditioned, or social norms would tell us we need to be stoic and we need to not be able to feel. And I don't think that's technically the truth. I think we should be stoic in certain realities, sure. We should be able to do what we need to do regardless of how we feel, sure. But, asterisk, we should also be able to, in the right circles, in the right context, be able to talk about our mental health, be able to reflect on the shit we've been through and the shit we need to heal from. And to be honest, be honest when we haven't healed from something.
It's that thing of, it's good to be vulnerable. However, you need to keep working on yourself and keep being that stoic man whenever possible. You can't just sort of sit at home, dwell on everything, and be just truly vulnerable like 100% of the time. You have to keep being that stoic person, that strong person all the time. A mix of vulnerability, like I say, is that meeting in the
Would you
middle.
say that, because I think there's a percentage of people who get into relationships because they want to be fixed, right? They need a partner to be fixed, quote unquote, whether they're doing it subconsciously or consciously. I think there's a large, and you and I have both done it, I'm sure. So we're speaking from experience, but I think that's the wrong time to get into a relationship, in my view. Then, if you're
People can't be by themselves nowadays. They can't sit in a room by themselves and entertain themselves. They they're searching for their fix to the loneliness. That's the issue. It's they should be able to sit on their own and entertain themselves for X amount of hours before you go and be with a person. Like I alluded to, this person should add value and make you happier, not be the reason to make you happy. All it's doing is putting a band-aid on the bleed. Like, you're still bleeding. All it's doing is just slowing that process down. And eventually that will become something more where you potentially might explode. So you need to be in the best physical and mental shape of your life, or best possible place, before you enter a relationship. I think it's almost selfish to go into a relationship if you are not giving your all and 110% to that person that you're entering into a
And I
relationship
think
to.
as a potentially a final point for those listening to consider, when you're going into a relationship, consider, are you ready? Not, this person's amazing, this person's beautiful, I love them so much, they're amazing, wonderful, blah 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 blah, whatever. Because I'll be honest. Yes, that still might be how you feel in 6 months to a year, but your context around that person and how they feel, because in a start of a relationship, you're both on the best fucking behavior. It's called a honeymoon period for a reason, and etc.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that the person that you're potentially getting in a relationship with isn't a fucking amazing person and isn't going to be great for you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, be aware, view that relationship through tinted specs at the moment, because you're not really being true to yourself at that point either. And even if you say you are, you're not. And I think the crux there is actually self-reflection and self-accountability is more important than anything else, because that will allow you to say, are you ready? And I said for a good 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, no, I'm not, right? And that's why I didn't, right? Not
Okay, and that's the best thing you could have done.
I said to those who were potentially interested, one of which being Mal, my partner, I said, look, nothing against you, and genuinely not against you. It's not this like, oh, I'm going to fob you off bullshit, right? No, it's genuinely, it's not you, it's me, because I need to I need to work on a load of shit that I can't muddy that water right now, right? I need to focus on me.
Yeah, like I say, you got to work on yourself and focus on yourself first before you can. Because, like I say, it's selfish for you to go into something where you're not fully healed from your past traumas, you're not fully healed from your past relationships, because all you're bringing to this person is baggage, and eventually you'll take out on them. And I'm not saying don't get into a relationship if you've got all this stuff, as long as you're actively trying to make this past better and work on that. There's no reason why you can't get into a relationship. It's just having that mutual understanding of, this is where I'm currently at in my life, and is this okay with this person?
Yeah,
And
it's
about
it's about being
be
transparent
yourself.
and being vulnerable to an extent. But also, if you don't think you're fully healed and you think you're healed enough where you can be in a relationship, I think there's levels of healing. I think it goes through stages, and I think you get to a point where, to heal from a previous relationship, you need to be in a new one, right? Because you have to replace those memories. You have to have to give more contrast, etc., etc. But I think, if you're going to do that, you need to be asterisk aware to the potential partner you're talking to about potentially the idea of getting together with them, etc. You need to say, look, I don't think I'm 100% healed here, and we might find some mines, right? We might find some trip hazards. We might find some shit here, right, that I'm not 100% sure. Are you okay with that? And
But it comes down to that communication, that honesty, and that transparency with this person. Communication is arguably the best thing you can do with anyone in life. And it probably would have stopped a lot of issues in my previous relationship had the communication between both of us, again, taking the self accountability, been better. Because if you don't talk about these things, they bottle up, bottle up, bottle up, goes down to the stoic male of being tough. If you don't deal with your stuff, eventually you're going to explode.
100%, I completely agree. And something for and I'll have back to you in a second, but the 3 rules that I have in every relationship that I have ever, this is not romantic, this is not professional, this is every single relationship I have in my life: communication number 1, understanding number 2, and forgiveness number 3, right? If you follow it in that order and you follow those 3 principles, you will have a good relationship with every single person you have in your life, right? Firstly, communicate the issue, communicate the problem, communicate the reality. Then understand how the other person feels about that thing, whatever that thing may be, and then forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, right? Because if you don't do either of the above, you can't heal, you can't move forward, you can't reflect. And sometimes people are going to need time to do that. That's cool. That's fine. But for those who really enjoyed the show, really enjoyed this episode, and they want to check out your podcast, they want to talk to you, etc., where's best to reach out?
So my podcast called Abel Lifestyle, ABEL. Some people get that mixed up sometimes. Reach me out on Instagram, ads_Abel. My inbox is always open. I'm here to help. Please don't feel like you're a burden to me. I'm here to help and try and make this world a better place, because I've been through my worst day, and if you're going through it, I know exactly what it feels like. Sure, I might not understand your situation, but I got a pretty good understanding of what might, I'm a mental health first aider as well, so I can direct you and signpost you to the right areas for help and guidance. But if you just need someone to vent, or someone to be there to listen to you, because I feel that's what half the issue with people nowadays is, they don't actually listen. And it goes down to us men, especially with women. Sometimes they'll come at you and they'll throw loads of stuff at you and they'll vent at you, and we're trying to fix. And actually half the time it's, okay, do you want to vent to me and me to listen, or do you want to vent to me and I'll give you advice? That's what the question we really need to be asking a lot of the time is, do you want me to listen or do you want advice? And half the time it's just listening. And that's the same with anybody.
Or to be heard,
half the
right?
time yeah. It's to be heard, and it's just someone to be there to actually it goes down to the presence. Presence is so important in this world. I think that's so underrated and so underappreciated, but yet so critical.
100%. And I'll quote Simon Sinek. He says many things of value, and if you don't know him, look him up. But one of the main things I'll add here is no one cries alone, right? And I think that's the important point that hopefully I will leave the audience with, which is considering who do you have to turn to when you want to cry, right? And it's okay to cry, for the record, but also who can you turn to? And, I like to kind of open up the end of the show to give, I hate calling it general advice, but if you were going to give general advice to someone either doing mental health or looking to, I think the important point here is to continue to put their dent on the world, especially as a man, right? Now, I'm not going to gender the argument specifically or the conversation, but like specifically as men, we can talk specifically about men's issues more than we can talk about females' issues. I mean, I've got no idea what a menstrual cycle is like, for example, hence why I'm not going to comment on it. Hence why I talk about men's issues more. And I think that's important to premise it by saying, but if you were going to give general advice, more general advice to be in touch with one's vision, to move one forward, etc., what would you say?
Surround yourself with great people. Surround yourself with people that care. Continually work on yourself, both physically and mentally, and simply talk and be vulnerable. Because if you are in the best physical place possible, I believe you'll be in a much better mental place regardless.
Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode and mine and Adam's conversation today. If you did, and you are new to the channel, why not subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode? And I will see you very, very soon.